Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
Scott Barker of Sun Prairie is a Republican candidate in the 16th Senate District. The election is November 3. Scott, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Good morning, Steve. Thanks for having me.
I noticed from going through your campaign websites, you're emphasizing the need to work on Wisconsin's infrastructure. The governor recommended raising the gas tax last year to provide a stable source of funding for highways. Could you vote to raise the gas tax, Scott?
That is something that I would support. That's something that seems like it does have a fairly decent support, even among other Republicans. They do seem a little torn between installing toll roads or increasing the gas tax. I would rather see us increase that gas tax and get rid of the minimum markup before we start installing toll roads in Wisconsin. We do need to have a long-term plan for funding our infrastructure so that this isn't a topic of discussion for every single budget. We need something that's going to be long-term that we can depend on so that we can continue working on our roads and our infrastructure.
Now, you're a Sun Prairie firefighter, correct?
That is correct. 14 years.
14 years. That's a volunteer force, right?
No, we're a combination fire department. So I have been a full-time member since 2017. I started in 2006 as a volunteer and then did that for 11 years.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, no problem.
Because the reason I ask is also on your campaign website, you talk about the need to better fund our emergency services like police, fire, EMTs. I guess here's my question. We have limits on what local governments can charge in property taxes because we're a high property tax state. Yeah. Should those caps on property tax, should they be lifted?
I don't agree with lifting the property tax caps. Wisconsin already ranks fifth among the highest tax states. We need to be able to spend our money a little bit more wisely versus just going ahead and increasing the tax across the board. We do need to look at different solutions in regards to that. Incremental changes is extremely important. So I think that's why it's important to have those caps. Even when it comes to public safety, being able to incrementally raise that level of service is still a good thing for the communities. We've been having to do that in our Sun Prairie is a huge, booming, growing community. And we've had to incrementally increase our police, fire, and EMS resources. And every year we get a little bit stronger, a little bit more effective, and it ends up being better for the taxpayers at the end of the day. They're still getting a better level of service, but it's incrementally. And I think that's important. We can't have just these swift changes unless a community is truly in dire need because of a lack of preparation to get where they need to be.
Scott, do local governments like Sun Prairie, do they need to look at alternative sources of revenue? Milwaukee wants to levy its own half-cent sales tax. There's a plan in the Capitol that would expand our 5% sales tax to some now exempt products and services and give local governments part of that increase. Do local governments need alternative sources of revenue?
I think it's very dependent on the community and the county. I don't think we should go away from removing items from sales tax that are already exempt. I don't think that's a solution. Dane County has the extra 0.5% sales tax. I would be more in support of the local municipalities and counties being able to raise those based on their needs. They are the ones that are intimately familiar with the county or government operations and what their 5-year plan looks like and what they're going to be needing as far as revenue. And they are taking a closer look at the revenue projections in their area. So they definitely have a better handle on where the funding needs to be in the long term. And I think that is better left at a more local level versus a state level of increases.
Some candidates that I'm interviewing suggest if we legalized recreational marijuana and medical marijuana, that would be a source of additional state revenues. Your position on that?
That is correct. And decriminalizing cannabis is one of my big issues that I do support, and that I do differ from my Republican colleagues in many aspects. I think that decriminalizing it will not only provide an alternative source of revenue for the state, but it's also going to be a step in the right direction towards criminal justice reform, which is a very big thing right now, and it always has been, and it always should continue to be a big topic. And I think that the legalization of cannabis is definitely going to be a step in the right direction. Both the economic impact as well as the social impact will be very positive for the state.
Senate Republicans have said they'd like to convene a special session and overturn the governor's statewide mask edict. Wear a mask if you're in an enclosed area. What's your position on the governor's mask edict, Scott?
So I do not support the way that the mask mandate came about. I don't think that it needed to be laid down that way. I think the executive branch and the legislative branch needed to do a lot more work together. And it seemed like both the governor's office and our Republican-led legislators seem to have an issue with kind of coming together and having a collaborative effort on that. And I think that that's unfortunate. I think that should highlight the fact that we need legislators that are willing to work with both sides of the aisle and with the executive branch, regardless of who the governor is. It's not something that I don't criticize the effectiveness of masks. Like we pointed out earlier, I'm a firefighter. I have been working with this since the very beginning of it, and I'm wearing a mask every single day while I'm at work, and I know that there's a time and a place to wear a mask. So I do not criticize the effectiveness of it or the need of it. I just think that a more regionalized or county approach is better for Wisconsin, and any type of mask mandate or any type of mandate or executive order, I want those to come from agencies or personnel that are doing it within the scope of their authority. And that is my simple stance on it. It's we need to be able to work within our scope of authority when we're issuing an order like that, especially something that affects millions of people, businesses, and families.
We got a report yesterday. State tax collections actually went up slightly in the year that ended June 30, but nobody knows what the pandemic is going to do to tax collections in the current year that ends next June 30. If we're $1 billion or $1.5 billion short, do we cut spending or do we raise taxes and fees?
We do not raise taxes and fees. We can't do that. That is going to put more financial strain on families that are already struggling. It's going to put more financial strain on businesses that are already struggling because of this. We're going to have to cut spending in order to make up some of that difference. Now, this is going to need to be a very collaborative effort with the governor's office, with the department heads, and with all of our lawmakers, both Democratic and Republican, because we want to do everything we can to limit the impact on all of our state employees. And we do not want to have any type of negative effects on critical services that the state is providing. So we have to be able to balance that. We are going to have to utilize those department heads, especially that are intimately familiar with their budget, with their operating procedures, and they're going to be the ones that best know where the cuts need to be made or where they can be made from, whether it's through projects and things like that. I would rather see a project get put on hold for a year versus employees get laid off or furloughed or something like that. So we're going to have a very collaborative effort on that. I can't stress that enough. We know going into next year, the biennial budget is going to be very similar, if not more crucial than what we dealt with during the 2008-2009 recession. So we're going to have to work together, and I don't think raising taxes is going to be the answer. I'm not a proponent of that. We can't put more financial strain on an already hurting economy.
The debate in the Capitol over who should draw the next congressional legislative district lines. The governor wants a People's Maps Commission, to draw them. The Constitution says the party in power in the Capitol should draw them. Who's right?
So I do not think that the People's Maps is a good alternative. From what I've been able to find out about the People's Maps Commission, it's hardly a bipartisan effort. The committee will be overseen by the Department of Administration, which is going to be overseen by a Democratic governor next year, as well as the committee is very small. It is only a 8 or 9 voting member committee from the congressional districts and a couple other community leaders. And the people that are appointing those positions are former or current judges, and 2 of the 3 are from some of our bluest counties in Milwaukee County and Dane County. So I have a hard time just buying that it's a bipartisan effort. I do believe in fair maps. I do believe that we should look at how we are restructuring our districts. I just don't think that the people's maps, as they call it, is a true, fair, bipartisan support effort. I think we need to also look at the fact that just prior to Governor Walker taking office in that 2009, 2008 area, everyone knew that 2011 would bring redistricting. And at that time, Democrats had control of the legislature. They had control of the governor's office, and they did not make changes to the way that the maps are drawn. So we need to sort of look at history. This isn't just a Republican problem, as it likes to get sort of put on the shoulders of Republicans. Democrats also had their chance to fix this issue. So I support fair maps. I don't support the People's Maps Initiative simply because it is not a bipartisan effort. And it talks about being needed to not disenfranchise people of Wisconsin. Yet, as far as I could read in it, we're already disenfranchising a lot of people in our communities, such as the Hmong community. The Hmong community was not going to get a community representative assigned to that. And we have a very great Hmong community throughout Wisconsin. And we're already disenfranchising certain areas of our communities by going with the People's Maps. And I don't believe in that. The only people that were going to get an additional community member was the African American community, the Latino community, and the Native American community, which I think is great, but we're leaving out a lot of people within that group. And it's a very small group that would be making the decision.
The governor has asked for a special session to act on his 9-bill package of policing reforms. It would, among other things, ban chokeholds, require reports of use of deadly force by officers, ban no-knock warrants. Can you support any of the 9 bills in the governor's package?
In fact, I would support 8 of the 9. I'm actually proud of the governor for these. After reading through them, I think that they are absolutely a needed step in the right direction. And I'm proud that the governor did not put up any type of bills that involve any type of defunding of law enforcement agencies. If anything, these bills will add funding to local law enforcement agencies. And it puts an emphasis on things like transparency and the use of force policies. And it puts an emphasis on community policing programs by putting out grants by the DOJ to implement community policing. I'm a fortunate citizen of Sun Prairie that has a great police department with an excellent community policing program. I can tell you that it is more costly because it is more officers on the ground that are working proactively with different neighborhoods, communities, landlords, and they are getting ahead of the problem before we have serious issues. So I'm proud of what they've put forth, and I hope that these do get acted on. The only one bill, like I said, I'll be very transparent. I do not support getting rid of no-knock warrants. No-knock warrants are done for the safety of the first responders, for the safety of the officers. These are only done with either suspects of very violent crimes or with a violent history. And by getting rid of a no-knock warrant, you are giving that suspect time to possibly arm themselves and harm officers as they enter the building. And these no-knock warrants, they're not taken lightly. These have been through a well-vetted process that a judge in our area right here, a Dane County Circuit Court judge, has signed off on and said, yes, this is a case where this is a needed type of warrant. So there is a well-vetted process that these go through, and these are not taken lightly. They are for the safety. I think one thing it's very important that we keep in mind, these police reforms are needed, and they're needed for the safety of everyone, and that includes police officers. So I don't support a reform that is going to put police officers in more harm than they already are. That job is already tough. I work with police officers every day, and I will never do anything that's going to put them at a greater risk of not coming home.
We have seen hospitals in Wisconsin and nationally play a key role in fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. If you're voting on the next state budget as a lawmaker, do hospitals deserve an even greater priority?
I do. I think that we need to make sure that all of our hospitals are back up, fully staffed. So if they did have to lay anybody off because of other services that were reduced during the pandemic, we need to make sure that all the hospitals are back up to full staffing and totally resupplied and prepared for anything else that gets thrown at us. The CARES funding, I believe, had about $40 million allocated for Wisconsin hospitals. The hospitals did have to apply for that. We need to make sure that that CARES money is being exhausted and distributed to the hospitals that applied for it. And then we need to take a look at state-run hospitals. State-run hospitals such as the UW and the VA, they were actually exempt from that CARES funding. They were not eligible for it. So we do need to put a little bit of an emphasis on those hospitals that were not eligible for the CARES funding. And we need to make sure that a needs assessment is done at those hospitals, and a needs assessment is done at all of the hospitals within our state, including the rural communities, and make sure that, like I said, we need to make sure that those are back up and running at full capacity. Healthcare is extremely important, and we can't have something else happen, whether it's another pandemic or a significant natural disaster, and have a hospital that is still trying to recover from the pandemic. We need to be able to make sure that they're ready to serve every single community.
Well, the Republican leaders of the U.S. Senate in their next CARES COVID response bill have said businesses and organizations that follow CDC guidelines to protect their employers and customers from the COVID virus should be exempt from lawsuits. Do we need a state law like that?
I do think that we need to have something in place that's going to protect businesses from these frivolous lawsuits. We need to, and this has bipartisan support in Washington, which is great to see, because we want organizations, we want companies to be able to reopen following guidelines that are put in place to protect health and safety. We want them following those guidelines. We want them reopening. That is vital for our economy here in Wisconsin and across our country. And I don't want to have businesses afraid of reopening because of a frivolous lawsuit by someone who contracts or ends up with COVID-19 shortly after visiting their business or their establishment. I don't want businesses to be afraid of that. I don't want businesses shutting down or staying permanently closed for longer periods of time because of that fear. I do think that the majority of businesses and organizations are genuinely concerned about their customers and are willing to put forth the efforts to reopen safely. And I don't want anyone to be afraid of that. The way that they worded that is that the businesses or the organizations followed guidelines and did not demonstrate any type of gross negligence or willful misconduct. And I think that that's the important thing to look at is was the company doing everything that they should have been doing? and then that should provide them a little bit of protection from those lawsuits.
When a school district or local government plans a public works project, should they have to give a preference to Wisconsin businesses? A study found that out-of-state contractors got $72 million in contracts for public works projects in 2015, but that total went up to $146 million in 2018. Local governments have to give a preference to Wisconsin businesses?
I think that we should. I think that we should definitely give that preference, as long as the company is able to meet the criteria of the job, and we are not sacrificing anything because of it as far as quality or time frames. I think that they should. We're not only helping out by supporting our own local workforce by giving preference there, but we are supporting a fairly extensive supply chain network within our state. To keep those projects going and to keep those companies supplied. So there's a very positive trickle down effect of giving the preference to the in-state companies. And in addition, by doing this, we're putting dollars back into economic activity throughout the state. And I think that is going to be extremely important to come next year when we do have businesses that are still hurting and still suffering because of 2020. So putting any type of economic stimulus back into the economy is amazing by my stand. So I do think that we should give preference to those companies.
Final question. Differences between you and your opponent on November 3?
So I'm facing Melissa Sargent. And I'd say one of the biggest differences between Melissa and I is I am very open and very willing to not only support different communities within our state that are going through extreme circumstances because of recent violence among police, protesters, rioters, and I'm also willing to say that I stand with law enforcement and with good police officers, and I do not necessarily pick a side between those two. I know that they are both very important, both have very good causes. And I think it's important that we are trying to unite people rather than divide people. And as I stated with cannabis, I am more than willing to go against what most Republicans might say they don't want. I'm not afraid to say that I do support something like that. And that's something that Melissa and many politicians on both Democrat and Republican sides are afraid to go against the party. They are not going to go against them. They don't want to be ousted. They want the funding and they want the support. And I'm going at this with the best interest of Wisconsin in mind. I'm not a party line voter. I believe in people learning about candidates versus voting for a party. And I think that that's how we need to operate in the Capitol as well. I look forward to working with Democrats across the board and Republicans on legislation. I think that's the best way to move our state forward, is to absolutely work together. And I know that I'm a person that can do that. So I'm also in support of just defending our freedoms and our constitutional rights. I'm a pro Second Amendment candidate. I am a freedom fighter for medical freedom. And I think that we need to get our economy reopened and in a safe manner, but we need to get our economy reopened before we have a decade's worth of negative effects. So, and that goes as far as the schools. I want schools open. I want children in schools. And those are big differences between Melissa and I. She's still on the page of shut everything down and keep kids home. And I'm not. And we need to do it safely. No doubt about that, but we need to get things reopened and we need to get things moving again here in Wisconsin, and we need to get our kids in school before we start seeing some really harmful side effects of that.
Thank you. Scott Barker on Prairie is a Republican candidate in the 16th Senate District. The election is November 3. Scott, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you so much, Steve. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.